The Ouija board is a mysterious and unsettling tool that has been used for centuries to communicate with spirits and entities beyond our physical realm. Many people believe that it can open a portal to the supernatural world, but using it can be a risky endeavor. When you sit down to use the Ouija board, you are essentially inviting unknown forces into your home and your life. As you place your fingers on the planchette and begin to ask questions, you may feel a sense of excitement or anticipation. But as the planchette starts to move, it can quickly turn into a feeling of dread and unease. You may find that the answers you receive are not what you were expecting. The spirits that come through the Ouija board may not be friendly or benevolent, and they may have their own agenda. They may even lie to you or try to deceive you. As you continue to use the Ouija board, you may start to notice strange things happening around you. Objects may move on their own, doors may slam shut, and you may hear whispers or footsteps when no one else is around. You may even start to feel like you are being watched. The scariest thing about the Ouija board is that once you start using it, it can be hard to stop. You may become addicted to the thrill of communicating with spirits, even if it puts you in danger. And once you open that door to the other side, it can be hard to close it again. So if you're thinking about using the Ouija board, be warned. It may seem like a fun and harmless game, but it can quickly turn into a nightmare. The spirits that you contact may not be who they claim to be, and they may have their own sinister motives. So tread carefully, and remember that sometimes it's better to leave the supernatural world alone. But if you are still interested, here are 3 unsettling stories about Ouija boards. Story number 1. The group of friends sat around the dimly lit table, their hands resting on the planchette of the Ouija board. They had heard the stories of its power, and they were eager to see if they could connect with the other side. At first, their questions were innocent enough, but as the planchette began to move, they soon realized that they were not alone. The spirits that they contacted were dark and twisted, and they seemed to be toying with them. As the session wore on, the group became increasingly uneasy. They could feel a presence in the room, and they began to hear strange noises and see shadows moving in the corners of their vision. But they could not stop. They were too curious to see where this would lead. As the night wore on, the messages from the other side became more and more sinister. The spirits demanded to be released from their eternal prison, and they promised that if the group helped them, they would reward them with untold riches and power. But as the group continued to play, they began to realize that they had made a grave mistake. The spirits that they had contacted were not interested in making deals, but in taking over their bodies and their souls. One by one, the friends began to fall prey to the dark forces that they had unleashed. They became possessed, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as they chanted in a language that was not their own. In the end, only one of the friends was left, the last survivor of a nightmarish ordeal that had begun with a simple game. And as he stared down at the Ouija board, he knew that he had to destroy it, to seal away the evil that he had unleashed. But as he reached out to grab the planchette, he felt a cold hand wrap around his wrist. He turned to see the ghostly form of one of the spirits that he had contacted, its eyes filled with a hunger that he could not comprehend. And as the last survivor screamed in terror, he realized that he had played a game that he could never win, with forces that were beyond his control. The Ouija board lay forgotten on the table, a gateway to darkness that would never be closed. Story number 2. There was an old abandoned house at the end of the street that had always intrigued a group of teenagers. They had heard rumors that it was haunted, and that the spirits that lingered within its walls could be contacted through a Ouija board. One night, they decided to break in and investigate. They brought with them a Ouija board and candles, hoping to make contact with the supernatural entities that were said to haunt the house. As they lit the candles and began to ask questions, the planchette started moving on its own. The group was amazed and frightened at the same time, but they could not stop. They wanted to know more about the spirits that they had contacted. The messages that they received were dark and foreboding. The spirits claimed to be the vengeful ghosts of former residents who had been wronged by the living. They demanded justice, and they promised to unleash their wrath upon anyone who dared to cross them. As the night wore on, the atmosphere in the house grew more and more tense. The group could hear strange noises and footsteps coming from the shadows, and they could feel an icy breath on the back of their necks. But they persisted, too curious to back down. And as they continued to play, the messages from the spirits became more and more threatening. They spoke of a curse that would be unleashed upon the living, and of a darkness that would consume the world. In the end, the group realized that they had made a terrible mistake. They had opened a portal to a realm that they could not control, and now they were at the mercy of the spirits that they had contacted. As the spirits grew more powerful, the house began to shake and the walls started to bleed. The group realized that they had awoken an ancient evil that could not be contained, and that they were its first victims. And as the last survivor fled from the house, they could hear the laughter of the spirits echoing through the night, promising to haunt and torment all those who dared to play with the Ouija board. Story number 3. It was a dark and stormy night when a group of friends decided to play with the Ouija board in an old abandoned building. They had heard stories about the power of the board and were eager to see if they could contact the other side. As they began to ask questions, the planchette moves on its own, spelling out words that made their blood run cold. The spirits that they contacted were angry and vengeful, and they demanded to be released from their eternal prison. The group realized too late that they had made a terrible mistake. The spirits had no intention of leaving them alone, and they began to haunt and torment them relentlessly. Everywhere they turned, they could feel the cold breath of the spirits on the back of their necks. They could hear strange noises and whispers in the darkness, and they could see shadowy figures moving just out of sight. But it was the dreams that were the worst. Every night, they were plagued by nightmares of the spirits reaching out to drag them into the abyss. They would wake up screaming, only to find that the spirits were still there, still watching and waiting. As the days turned into weeks, the group began to unravel. They could no longer tell what was real and what was not. They could hear the spirits whispering to them, promising them power and riches beyond their wildest dreams, but at a terrible cost. One by one, the group began to succumb to the spirits' influence. They became possessed, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as they carried out the spirits' bidding. In the end, only one of the friends was left, the last survivor of a nightmarish ordeal that had begun with a simple game. And as he looked down at the Ouija board, he knew that he had to destroy it to seal away the evil that he had unleashed. But as he reached out to grab the planchette, he felt a cold hand wrap around his wrist. He turned to see the ghostly form of one of the spirits that he had contacted, its eyes filled with a hunger that he could not comprehend. And as the last survivor screamed in terror, he realized that he had played a game that he could never win, with forces that were beyond his control. The Ouija board lay forgotten on the table, a gateway to darkness that would never be closed. And that's it. See you in the next one.